Welcome everyone to Hope Against Hope, Spirituality and Climate Change vodcast for COP26. I'm Mia Spiro, Senior Lecturer in Jewish Studies in TRS. And today we have with us Dr. Saeko Yazaki, who will be speaking to us about, her title is What a Waste, Japanese Spiritual Traditions of Mottainai as Sustainable Environmental Practice. Saeko is a lecturer in religious studies at the University of Glasgow. She's interested in intra-religious relations within Islam, as well as cross-cultural interactions, in particular Muslim-Jewish relations, and also how Japanese traditions have been introduced and interpreted in Western societies. So thank you, Dr. Yazaki, for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Mia, for your kind introductions. So thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for both of you to come here and join my talk. So Mottainai is often translated as water waste in English. It is a Japanese term that has gained international currency among environmentalists and provided a rallying call for a more sustainable lifestyle. So a culture of minimizing waste is deeply rooted in Japanese traditional lifestyle, partly through the Shinto and Buddhist idea of appreciation and respect for all things, including nature and material objects. So in this talk, after introducing the meaning of Mottainai and its roots in the Japanese religious worldviews, I will discuss the Mottainai spirit in kimono making and reuse, and Kintsugi, golden joinery, a technique to repair broken pottery. And I will also touch upon how this philosophy is manifested in Buddhism, Buddhist cuisine. So Mottainai has three related meanings. So first, disrespectful or offensive to kami, which are deities of Shinto. Shinto is the Japanese indigenous belief, and Buddhas or someone higher. And second, undeserved or thankful. And the third meaning is regretful that something or someone is being discarded or neglected needlessly. So it is an old ethical concept in Japan, but has been used to present, and now the term presents relevance to the contemporary ecological concerns. So in 2005, the Kenyan Nobel Prize winner, Wangari Maathai, introduced this term as a slogan for environmental protection because the term encapsulates the three R's, reduce, reuse, and recycle, plus a fourth, respect. So her embrace of the term reflects a surge in the usage of Mottainai in children's literature, pop songs, campaigns by NGOs and corporations at the beginning of the 21st century in Japan. So this is a kind of famous Mottainai children literature. So there is an English translation, Mottainai grammar as well. And there are various songs and also various campaigns and literature in Japan. So Mottainai is often translated as water waste in English, but it is much more than that. So it is rooted in the worldviews of Shinto and Buddhism, the two major religions which are practiced simultaneously or alternately by the vast majority of Japanese. So in Shinto, which is associated with an immense number of kami deities in nature, anything or anyone may be kami as long as they are all inspiring, regardless of whether their power is good or evil. So one of the characteristics of Shinto deities, they are not necessarily good or just or merciful at all, actually. Evil power can be considered as kami, as long as the kami is more like the power to inspire. So a distinction between kami, nature or humans, and material objects is rather ambiguous or fluid because any being is considered to possess tama or soul or spirit. So for example, according to the medieval record of tsukumogami, literally tool kami, there are abandoned utensils here in this picture, these utensils are abandoned, and they became vengeful kami after years of service. So in the story, after learning Buddhist teachings, they repented and eventually attained Buddhahood. So this is how they became kami. And then after that, they became rather naughty, and then eventually they became Buddha in a way. So etiquette for co-living applies not only for humans, but anything in this world as a fellow being, because everything or every being is capable of displaying kami quality. As for Buddhism, its central cosmology includes the perception of non-self or anatman. So every entity from the universe, nature to object is one, and all the phenomena in this inseparable whole are related. So nothing separates ourselves from others, and the full realization of being part of one, this total whole, is the stage of enlightenment. So non-self is to help understand the self as its totality through embracing the nature of interdependence of all phenomena. So I just put everything in a very simple way to put things in 5 minutes. But presenting in a different way, my point is both Shinto and Buddhism regard this world as an organic, inseparable existence where no thing or no person, either natural or human or material, is superior or higher. So this sense of interconnectivity forms the original meaning of Mottainai, as the country enjoys a rich tradition of repair and reuse, expressing empathy, appreciation, and respect for nature, objects, and those who made them. So I would like to first look at the first example of kimono making and reuse. So kimono production is based on a practical and ecological idea. Kimono may sound nothing to do with Mottainai because the image of kimono is often a luxurious Japanese attire worn on special occasions. But the process of kimono making and reuse embodies the principle of Mottainai in effective usage of and respect for materials. So the kimono is made of oblong-shaped pieces which are cut out from a scroll of fabric called tamono. So nowadays, 14-inch wide and 12 to 14 yard long. And this is a diagram on kimono. So as you can see here, so there are 2 sleeves here, and the proportion is not really right, but so this is the long pieces, 2 pieces back and front, and then the collar and some other bits and pieces. So as you can see here, all the pieces are just oblong shaped. So the scroll of fabric is cut straight, so there's no curved piece after cutting. So there's none to waste during the cutting process. And once the scroll of fabric is cut, there is no need to cut the fabric anymore, because while sewing, unnecessary material is kind of folded in rather than discarded. So again, nothing is wasted. So one of the characteristics of kimono is that it can go back to a scroll again after unstitching. So araihari is a method to clean kimono and give it a new life. So kimono is unstitched, all the parts are sewn back together to make a bolt of fabric again and clean it, and after various process, kimono is given a new life. So the same technique has been used for centuries and centuries. So in fashion industry, waste of material during cutting has been an issue. So for example, the House of Commons Environmental Audit Committee in 2019 found that 15% of textiles is wasted during cutting in the UK. So as part of the sustainable fashion movement, zero waste pattern cutting has been experimented. So it's like a jigsaw puzzle, because often the clothes here on kimono is like have a lot of curved lines. So they have to do some jigsaw. But some designers have been inspired by the kimono zero waste pattern using only straight lines as well. I'm not sure this pattern was directly inspired by kimono making, but just an example of using only straight line. So going back to kimono, so various techniques are also used to prolong the life of kimono. For example, kise is like a tiny buffer zone to protect the seam. So fuki is to protect the outer, more extensive fabric by making the liner longer. Or kakeeri or haneri are to protect the collar, which gets dirty and damaged more easily. So there are so many other things, but the fundamental philosophy of kimono production is to facilitate the process of repairing, reusing, or remaking, or upcycling, called kurimasi. So typical examples would be swapping the sleeves. So the edge of sleeves can get dirty or damaged easily in everyday life. So then the sleeves would be swapped so that the damaged part can be sewn into the body part. Or if the bottom is damaged, you could make a shorter hari jacket from kimono, a kimono for children, etc. Because kimono is actually so durable, so it can last after generation and generation. So after remaking many times and when there is not much usable fabric left, you can still make patchwork kimono or cushions or furoseki, which is a Japanese wrapping cloth traditionally used to transport anything, or small bags, or otedamas, like small bean bags, a traditional Japanese children's game, or tsumamizaiku, which is like using tiny square pieces of kimono cloth to make like a beautiful object. And because kimono is just made of oblong shaped pieces, it is really easy to reuse. And after remaking and repairing so many times and the fabric gets torn and damaged completely, when you might think it cannot be reused anymore, there's still a way to use. So sakiori is a technique, like a woven fabric made of walnut cloth and kimono. So damaged kimono would be torn thinly and then woven tightly to make obi sash or clothing or blankets or others. So according to the House of Commons Environmental Audit Committee report, again, so more clothes were purchased in the UK per person than any other European countries. But 300,000 tons of textiles end up in bins every single year in the UK, and many of them are never worn. So fast fashion waste has been the term often used now. So thanks to a rapid production system, low prices, quick turnaround of trends, and consumer throwaway mentality, many clothes are purchased easily and many of them are never worn. The environmental footprint of clothing is extraordinary. So fashion industry is one of the most polluting industries on earth, alongside the petrochemical industry. So hopefully this Mottainai tradition in the kimono making and reusing process can offer some inspirations, as it has already to some designers. So looking at tsumamizaiko, sakiori, etc., I really like the way in which practical solutions become objects of beauty. So kintsugi is another example. So kintsugi is often translated as golden joinery. So it is a technique to repair broken pottery with lacquer, like used as glue, and dust it with powdered gold or silver or platinum or other things as well. So kintsugi is basically just repairing broken pottery, but it's more than repair. Through kintsugi, broken pottery starts a new life. So lacquer is the sap of the lacquer tree and has been used for coating as well as glue since the prehistoric time and in Jomon era, for example. So lacquer was already used to repair broken Jomon pottery. Lacquerware is a long-standing tradition in Japan, and probably during the 14th or 15th century, the technique of decorative lacquerware, makie, and the philosophy of the way of tea were combined, and the artistic value of kintsugi started to be recognized. So the way of tea, which is usually called the Japanese tea ceremony, but I'm not too keen on this this interpretation because it's not really about ceremony. But so I just called it the way of tea, the way the Japanese would say. So the way of tea developed alongside Zen. So it emphasizes simplicity. So in the way of tea, things are cherished as they are. For example, Tenshin Okakura at the end of the 19th century says in his book of tea that the way of tea is essentially a worship of the imperfect. So, for example, rakuware is a type of Japanese pottery traditionally used for tea bowls. So, rakuware is hand-shaped, so it is never perfectly round. So, it is asymmetric and may even look unfinished. It may be an acquired taste, but for me, it has kind of more character, has more life, something I wouldn't get bored of. And this sort of unintentional, unique shape, and also the unintentional, unique kind of way the glaze going down, or like some pattern made in a kiln by fire, that is appreciated as scenery or landscape called keshiki. So even a crack is considered to be a tasteful scenery of a ware. So in this image, so a crack here, this crack here looks like a mountain with the glaze as clouds. So with the technique of decorative lacquerware and the philosophy of tea, Kintsugi became more than a simple repair. So Kintsugi is practical. It wouldn't be done unless pottery is broken. So it is a practical solution, but because cracks are made unintentionally without calculation, pottery with Kintsugi offers more spontaneous, unusual beauty. So, for example, some wares made into important cultural property in Japan thanks to Kintsugi. So this one is tsuitsu, made in the 15th or 16th century. So the cracks were made by a servant of Hideyoshi, a very famous samurai at the time. And another important ware in Japan. So the cracks were made while being baked in kiln, this one. And this one is actually the wife of my late professor in Japan doing Kintsugi and some of the project she was dealing with at the time. And I actually like some bowls like this one, I particularly look actually nicer and more interesting with Kintsugi. The part which is repaired is also called scenery, keshiki, which is enjoyed and cherished. So repair means rebirth, and accidental damage becomes an object of admiration. So the pottery with Kintsugi actually rises in rank. So finally, Buddhist cuisine or shojin ryori in Japanese. So shojin ryori recognizes that humans have to rely on others' lives. So it is usually considered to be a vegetarian or vegan dish expressive of the Buddhist teaching of non-violence towards all sentient beings. But the point of shojin ryori is not about non-killing, because plants and fruits are also alive. Shojin ryori is an expression of respect and appreciation through zero-waste cooking, eating, and taking care of cooking utensils and more. So in Japanese Buddhism, cooking or eating or cleaning, these are all considered to be very important part of practice, not only meditation at all. The Buddhist monks in Japan are actually quite busy with cleaning and cooking. So the founder of Soto Zen school in Japan, Dogen, left a long instruction for the chef at the Buddhist monastery. For example, when you wash rice and prepare vegetables, you must do it with your own hands and with your own eyes, making sincere effort. Do not be careless even when you work with poor materials, and sustain your effort even when you have excellent materials. And never change your attitude according to the materials. If you do, it is like wearing your truth when speaking with different people. Then you are not a practitioner of the way. So for example, when we cook vegetables, we may peel the skin of potatoes or carrots. And how many people use the skin? So the end of carrots or cucumbers or the green bit of tomatoes often end up in a bin or compost at the best. But they are not rubbish. So any part of a vegetable is full of blessing of nature. So shojin ryori is to make the best use of any material without wasting anything with deep appreciation. For example, skin can be used for kimpira, a type of Japanese dish, or pickles. And ganmodoki, this is bits of like skins and other bits and pieces of vegetables with tofu and deep fried. Or we can have like vegetable stock from skins and other bits and ends as well, and really tasty and actually nutritious one. And this is one of the books on shojin ryori recipes. So Otera Gohan by Aoe Kakuo. Otera Gohan means the dishes at Buddhist temples. So he says what is important in shojin ryori is teinei ni tsukuri, teinei ni itadaku. So teinei ni means with respect, with care, with due attention, scrupulously, and tsukuru to make or cook. So itadaku is a humble language and meaning to have or receive or accept. So the point of shojin ryori is not necessarily vegetarian or vegan cooking. It is about to cook and to receive lives with respect, appreciation, and humility. As he says in the postscript to the book, so to eat means to take lives and take them into our body. This remains the fact even though a meal is taken casually, in haste, or even something we dislike is part of the meal. So we must pay attention to the lives which have been taken and receive them humbly with a sense of awe and gratitude. So unfortunately, the environmental footprint of food is also depressing. So the UK throws away 9.5 million tons in a year, the highest in Europe. And over a third of all food produced globally goes to waste. And according to the UN Environmental Programme, 8 to 10% of greenhouse gas emissions are associated with unconsumed food. And more than 61% of food waste comes from households. So we looked at 3 examples of the way of Mottainai, so kimono making and reuse, Kintsugi, golden joinery, and Buddhist cuisine. So as mentioned, Mottainai is often translated as water waste, but I hope it became clearer that the meaning of Mottainai is much more than that. So it's like a blend of practicality and ecology, aestheticism, and spirituality, and probably more. So part of the meaning of Mottainai is indeed avoidance of wastefulness, but this is more like the end result. The term is rooted in the Shinto and Buddhist teaching of interconnectivity and the worldviews where no being, nature, or human or material object is superior. And Mottainai contains within it a deep sense of humility towards the gift of the natural world. But just to note though at the end, despite the fact that Japan had such values embedded in its traditions, history, and culture, the country has not been known for progressive environmental policies. So it was just last week or so, Japan won this inglorious Fossil of the Day award by the Climate Action Network, which gives this award every day during COP to name and shame countries for not seriously addressing climate change. So after Wangari Maathai embraced the term in 2005, various campaigns were launched by the government, especially the then Prime Minister Koizumi and the then Minister of the Environment, Koike, for a zero waste, zero emission Japan. But the government campaigns were short-lived, basically not that successful. So considering the long and rich tradition of Mottainai in Japan, I feel rather frustrated. And I should have done this talk maybe in Japanese to the Japanese people. But there are a number of grassroots activities which can now be seen in various social media. So you don't need to be Japanese or practice Shinto or Buddhism in order to embrace the Mottainai ethics. If we can just remember a sense of respect and gratitude towards the gift of nature, I think we would never waste anything. So Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Saeko, for such a wonderful, informative talk. I love the ideas of that respect and appreciation and humility and intertwined and interconnected with waste and not wasting. And I found myself thinking about, even during lockdown here in England, one of the most viewed Netflix shows was Marie Kondo, of course, where all this clothing was being thrown out in people's idea of purging their closets and their drawers and their houses with unneeded and unnecessary clothing. So, in terms of contemporary attitudes, is there a resurgence of interest in some of the Japanese traditions and concepts among a younger generation?
In Japan, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, and in terms of kimono, for example, there are so many second-hand kimono shop, and actually majority of my kimono, including this one, just a second hand. Because as I said, the kimono are very durable. It is meant to last for generations. So there are many ways. And so there are also many YouTube clips and bloggers and vloggers informing how to use those second-hand kimono in your own style, or there are many tips as well. And so I think more and more, probably younger generation are more aware of the situation. And the Japanese economy was probably the highest after the war in the 1980s, and then it dropped. But that was the time when second-hand kimono shop started to flourish. So probably, there was kind of awareness that I wouldn't say it was the end of the consumer through mentality, but there's more like an awareness as well. Now the economy is going down, so maybe we should be a bit more careful about that as well. And then this Mangai Wata's embracement of the term helped, because when things are recognized outside Japan, probably the people in the country would, actually we have something valuable which has been recognized by the foreigners. And then so that became a bit of a boom at that time, and then goes down again. So I think now because of COP, hopefully it comes back again as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yazaki. We have here Dr. Ophira Gamliel, who's joining us to respond to Saeko's talk. Dr. Gamliel is a lecturer in South Asian religions in theology and religious studies at the University of Glasgow. And she's working on Indian Ocean history and environmental issues in coastal communities. So thank you, Ophira, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, and thank you, Saeko, for the lovely presentation. It's really thought-provoking in various respects. And the first thing I would like to mention, it's something that keeps on coming when people discuss religions and cultures and their histories and the environmental issues on the table. And that came up at the end of your lecture. You said, okay, we have all these wonderful values, but we won the prize of number one in fossil fuel usage. And I couldn't help thinking also about, the many plastic covers that each Japanese food item has, right? When you go to a Japanese grocery store and you buy some snacks, they are packed like anything, like 3 or 4 layers. Each thing is packed, and then again it's packed, and then again. So I can imagine there's a lot of waste going on in Japan, but you don't see it, right? It's very clean. My point is that there is something in our modern culture of waste, and in this kind of ideology of accumulation and complete neglect of the environment, of vulnerable communities, of the non-human world, etc., that is ingrained in this, I don't want to sound too ideological, but there is this ideology of capitalism. You just grab, accumulate wealth, and never mind all the rest. And environmentalists keep on talking about this issue, that in the economic worldview of current economics, the idea is that, there is just production and households, and the whole economy is like kind of a circle completely detached from the environment, without considering externalities, without considering the labor, without considering anything. So you don't need to be, a Western UK-based person with the history of your own culture in order to be wasteful. You can be wasteful in India, and you can be wasteful anywhere else. And regarding the interesting cultural items you brought to the fore, so it sounds to me really special. I never heard anything like that, even though I do study Buddhism for many years, and and also in Hindu civilizations or Jain, they have a lot of respect towards every germ, right? That you shouldn't waste their lives, and you have this total respect. Everything is interdependent. So in Buddhism, it's non-Atman, there is no self, but in Hinduism, everything is self, right? So basically, it leads to the same point. Everything is interconnected, and therefore every other is also you, right? So you have to be considerate, which is fine, but if the rivers in India are considered goddesses, that doesn't really prevent them from being terribly polluted, right? So we have to think, I believe, that these cultures of reuse and recycling and producing things that will last long, there were in so many different cultures, not necessarily in global southern cultures or in Asian or East Asian or Southeast Asian cultures. So if to think some examples from monotheistic religions, for example, right? So you have this idea of not throwing pieces of paper on which Hebrew letters, Hebrew characters are written, right? You have to treat them in a very considerate and respectful manner, and there's a special chamber in the synagogue where you put them there, and so based on that we have the holy trash of the Geniza, right, where they found the synagogue chamber that they put all the Hebrew manuscripts and even in other languages, and they would just remain there. And we have this amazing source of Indian Ocean history based on that Cairo Geniza. So this idea of preserving nature and being respectful, I think it is something that was there in so many different religions, even if it was not named in this way. And another thing that came to mind, I can give a lot of examples from what I've seen in South Asia in different ways, like what people do, despite a lot of waste in the streets, because people still have this respect towards every piece of food or every piece of cloth or every piece of material. It was at first surprising, because you have this idea that in India everybody is spiritual, so they don't care about matter. It's not true. Material has its own sacredness and importance, and the poorer you are, the more respectful you are towards those materials, right? So you speak about kimonos. Saris, of course, are just one big piece of cloth, or mundus are one big piece of cloth. They're lungi or mundus, and they are always reused. Either they are used for stitching pillows and things like that in the house, making curtains or covering, beds, making different types of house material. Or if the material is too old and too torn, they make, cloth for cleaning. So they don't buy clothes for cleaning like we do, right? You go to the supermarket and buy special new stuff in order to clean with. This is like unthinkable in South India. Or I couldn't help noticing when I was living there the amount of waste that I as a single person produce, as opposed to a family of 14 souls with whom I was living for some time, and I needed to throw my waste somewhere, right? After, I don't know, a week or two, right? So I would ask, where can I put this, a little bag with all kinds of packages of stuff, shampoo or whatever. And they tell me, oh, you just go to the back of the garden and you make a little pile and you burn it. And then I realized that when you have to live with your own waste, when you can't just pack it and put it in the bin, and then somebody else comes and take it, and you don't know what happens to it next, that in itself makes you produce much less waste. You stop and think before you buy another thing which is packed with something, because you will have to throw it back in the garden and burn it, and it's not nice. And that brings me to the issue of the textiles in the UK. I don't know if you're aware of that. It's not only that the textiles that are being thrown away are piling up. They are not just piling up in the UK, they are shipped. And that's another, this whole idea of recycling in this kind of system that doesn't really care about the environment or the implications, right? So they put a nice label so people will be happy that they recycle, that we recycle, right? We have a nice bin, we throw everything there. It is shipped to the global south. And in the global south, people are looking at the pieces of cloth that we throw and say, how do you wear this thing, What is it? I once saw a TV program about that, and they're just looking at all kinds of those, as you said, the material is cut in those strange places. So they look at it and say, how are people wearing those things? They don't know even what to do with it. This culture of reuse and recycling, and even more importantly, producing things that would last long, I think this was everywhere. You can find in European cultures as well, items of food that are made out of leftovers, like bread that becomes dry. You can use it in order to cook something new, right, out of this old bread. Or, I don't know, gefilte fish, right, Mia, for Jews, which is made from the fish with all the bones and everything crashed into a paste and made into like fish cakes. So you have this. Basically, I think even the generations of our parents and grandparents still had this kind of respect to material that is, in the past, I don't know, a few decades, became so, everything can be thrown, everything can be bought anew, you don't need to repair anything. There is this massive production and waste going on. And waste is actually one of the largest problems we face today in the world. It's even worse than climate change.
No, thank you very much. And yes, in terms of wrapping culture in Japan, it is really true. 10 nails wrapping, and because presentation is very important in Japanese culture. So that has been, of course, revised. And then, so that's why that furoshiki, the traditional cloth, just square wrapping material, that has been used instead. So just reuse those wrapping paper. Presentation still counts, it's important, but we can kind of giving that wrapping paper or like fabric furoshiki and then give it to someone, and then that person can reuse that one. And so there's bits and pieces, I think, kind of modernizing or like making our traditional way more relevant, because I think it is true that in any culture, until very recently, this is really the modern issue. This throwaway mentality is a very contemporary issue. It wasn't, people were not in that luxurious situation in the past. So there is this knowledge and there is this tradition, but in a way they have to be translated in an attractive way so that people now would like to do it. So I think that's the kind of tradition probably we all have to do. And it is true that if we have to deal with all the waste we produce in our back garden, I think we should be actually very careful about it. So that may be actually a good idea to do that.
I would just like to add something small about this. There were those floods in Kerala and those following everything, etc., etc. Kerala is the place where I was living for several years. And then a few months later, there were floods in Japan. And I could see the Malayalis on social media, the Keralites on social media, looking at the pictures from Japan and see, Look at the floods in Japan. It's so clean. The floods in our place are all full with all this waste flowing everywhere, you know. We should learn from them how to keep everything clean. So when we are flooded, we don't have all this waste popping up and flooding our streets. Just a small point. So yeah. I don't know what you're doing with waste in Japan that doesn't come up with floods. But they have a point. It looks so clean, you know.
Interesting, yeah. I didn't look at the flood that way.
But it's also, I think, I think we tend to think when we're thinking about COP26 on a very global scale, the big pictures that we see from the floods and on television and on the streets. But I was really struck, Saeko, about the everydayness and the home as the center. You seem to be talking about of this idea of non-waste, and since this is theology and religious studies sponsored talk, I was also thinking about that in terms of faith and practices and ritual that are connected with the everyday. For example, I couldn't help thinking about you talking about stopping and paying attention in terms of food. And, in traditional Judaism, you say a prayer before anything you eat, or you stop and it gives you at least that moment to pause and think, okay, I'm going to consume something, and I'm thinking about what I'm consuming. There's specific prayers for different kinds of foods. It's not just thank you for this food. There's the kind of food that grows and the kind of food that doesn't grow, and whether it's bread or wine and the same thing with new. I grew up in an Orthodox household, so we would get things that were new usually around a holiday time. You would get new shoes or a new dress, for the new year or for Passover. But we would say a prayer for that new thing and for that new occasion. And in some ways, that's also lost, I think, in terms of when you think globally, that everydayness of appreciation, whether you're a faith practitioner or not, but how to stop and think about what it is that I'm consuming, what it is that I'm using, what am I using it for, and slowing down. And we're very distracted. A generation, we're distracted by our phones and by our multitasking and by the information coming through. So that's really what struck me about this idea was how to practice that respect and that pause that comes before the use.
Yes, I think everydayness is really key. You don't have to be a politician or believer or anything. Just from now, when you cook or when you eat meal, and just think, just as you said, just pause and think, and also try to use as much as possible. And if every single person does it, I think there will be much less waste, like very quickly as well. So I think it's just a reminder is probably something we need, like a constant reminder, because as I said, it's very easy to forget in this hectic lifestyle. And so sometimes, yes, we often buy something we don't use or unnecessary stuff and waste it. So I think just pause a little bit and then think we actually have more than we need already.
Yeah, and in this context, I think we have to also go a little bit beyond the individual responsibilities. There are issues here that are a matter of governance that must be taken into account. For example, to stop this very bad habit of manufacturers to deliberately give short-term life to their products, or construct products in a way that they you can't replace, you can't repair. So now there is this kind of repairing movement that is coming up, which is, in a conversation with Kintsugi, right?
Yes, yeah.
Repairing. So repair, to be able to reuse and to repair, these are concepts that kind of were thrown out of the back door of capitalist production means, and that has to be put back. But this cannot be done if each of us is thinking about every item. That is fine. We can reduce our own personal waste. We can treat our waste in a different way, but there has to be something done on a global level, especially that you think that, when you producing computers, for example, the minerals for computers and mobile phones, etc., are peaking. Copper is peaking. Whatever we throw in electronic waste reaches Africa and other countries in the global south, and people are sifting through to take out the copper and sell it. It's quite horrible, actually, what is happening with the waste that we produce, because manufacturers produce it so we buy more. So something has to be done on a governance level in order to deal with the waste.
Yes, I think many things should be done in various levels. In all levels, individual level, everyday, and also politicians level, and also, of course, the manufacturers level as well. And I don't know here, but I think more and more, in terms of Japan, more and more companies and department stores start offering repairing old bags or repairing old items, and Kintsugi as well. I think it's important thing is, for example, in terms of Kintsugi, those repaired items were considered to be more important. I think that kind of perspective is probably helpful. If people can think, repaired items are cool, and then that's more attractive to have and to use. I think, that kind of direction would be probably helpful as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Saeko, for your talk, and thank you, Ophira, for coming in with your response. I think we all learned so much about it. So thank you all, and we'll end this session of Hope Against Hope for TRS.
Thank
you very much. Bye-bye.